In this lesson, we'll look at strings and floats. Up to now, we've looked at a few different data types. We've looked at numbers like 1, 2, 3, and these were integers. And in Python, they're given the name int for int. If you have a decimal point, any number which has a decimal point, positive or negative, it's called a floating point number or just a float. We looked at Boolean values, and Boolean values had one of two different values, true and false. And now we're going to look at the string data type. Now in Python, you can determine what data type something has by using the type function. So if we had a number like this, we can see that's an int type with a decimal point. That's a float. The Python string type is used to represent and manipulate text data, or in other words, a sequence of characters. That includes blanks, punctuation, and various symbols. A string value is represented as a sequence of these types of characters that's enclosed within quotes. So if we give an example here, that's an example of a string. We can assign a string to a variable, and then we can simply type the variable name, and that returns the string value. There are actually string operators as well. We've defined s. We'll define another variable t. And we can test to see if s equals t. They're two different strings, so they return false. We can test to see if a variable is equal to a string. Here, s is equal to hello, so that will return true. We can use all the normal tests that we can use with integers and floats. So s not equal to t, that's true. Let's look at some of these other tests here. Less than or greater than, what do they mean? Well, what we're looking for there is a dictionary order of s and t. So s less than t means that does the string contained in f come before t if you were doing a dictionary sort? Hello, H, as we start with H and it's compared to the W in world. Since H is before W, S is less than T and it returns a true. S greater than T would obviously return a false. We can also do something called concatenation, or adding two strings together. And we do that using the plus operator. And this simply takes the characters in S, the 5 characters here, the 5 characters in T, and adds them together. If we wanted a space, we could do something like this. A quote with a space in between it. What would happen if we did this? We get an error because multiplication doesn't make sense for strings. We could, however, do something like this. So 3 times one character or literal will return 3 of that. Or 4 times the string AB will return AB, AB, AB 4 times. We can also search for letter patterns with inside a string. For instance, we know that S is the word hello. So we could say HE in S, and what that does is a Boolean test to see if HE is in S, and if it is, it returns true. If not, it returns false. We could say W not in S. What that means is we do not want W to be in S. So in this case, W is not in S, and it's going to return true. Maybe easier to look at this. W in S. Is W in S? No, because the word hello. So that's false. So W not in S would obviously be the reverse of that. We can also use a function called len for length to find the length of string S. It's got 5 characters. Hello. Len of S plus T would be 10, because that's hello world as we've concatenated those together. We're now going to give you a chance to put some of this into practice. I want you to do these 4 exercises here. First of all, define these 3 variables, and then write an expression similar to a Python expression like this, and create an output that looks exactly like these. Now note there's a space at the end of these lines here. So pause the video, complete the exercise, and then you can resume the video and check your answers. So here are the answers to those. This is the expression for the first one. Fairly straightforward. The second, you'll see in the third I made a mistake here. You need some trial and error at times. This is the correct answer for the third one and the fourth one. Let's now look at what is called an indexing operator. In the indexing operators, the square brackets. And what that allows us to do is to select individual characters of a string. So if we have a string here, 5 characters of hello, S0 here would be the H. S4 here, if we started 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, would be the O. And indexing positions are numbered this way, from left to right, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. They can also be referenced using negative numbers. So S of -1 would be the last element, or the first from the right-hand side. S of -2 would be the L. So using positive numbers in these indexing numbers here, we go from left to right, 0 to 4, but in the negative numbers we start at the right, -1, -2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. So here's another little exercise. Using this string to find this first, try to write expressions using the indexing operator for these 3 things. Pause quickly and then check your answer. So here's the 3 answers for those. It's quite simple. But be aware when you're talking about literals that the character 2 is not equal to the number 2. If we do a comparison test, we'll see it's false. So if you take 2 times the number 2, you'll get 4. 2 times a literal 2 simply makes 2 characters of the same value. So strings and numeric characters, or numeric data types like integers and floats, are handled totally different by a computer program. Now let's look at lists. What's a list? A list is a sequence of any types of objects. So we'll start with a very simple list here. P and we use these square brackets to denote the beginning of our list, and we're going to fill our list here with three strings: cat, dog, and fish. So we have several characters, but only three elements in our list here. And we can reference using the indexing operator. So if we do 1, we should get the second item in our list here, which is dog. We'll make up another list here, and we're going to show that a list can contain different types of data. So we've got a string, we've got an integer, and we're actually going to put in another list inside here. So again, we have three things in Q. This time we're going to use a minus operator, and this should return the first element from the right hand side, which is a list. We could find the type of that by doing this. And find that that's a list. If you're unsure of what data type you're working with, type is very handy. And so we now have 4 or 5 data types that we've worked with: int, float, boolean, list, and string. We can find the length of lists just as we did with strings. We had 3 elements in Q. And we can check to see if elements, things are inside a list. For instance, is the number 2 in P? No, but it is in Q because it's the second element. Is cat in P? Yeah, but it's not in Q. We can also use some of the functions, min, max, that we've used before. I'm going to create my list here, and I'm going to take these a little out of order. And so if I do min of my list, we'll get 1.5. So it doesn't matter if the sequence go in a normal sort of sorting order. The max of my list would be the largest number, and you can even do a sum because it makes sense on this to do. Now we had the list P. You can do a min on P, and you'll say, well, those aren't numbers. But what it does is it returns the lowest, the smallest, min means smallest, dictionary order. So we return cat no matter, these are actually in dictionary order, but even if they weren't. And max of P would be the one that starts with the largest letter, which is fish. Sum, not quite sure what sum's going to do. Give us an error because it doesn't make sense to use sum with a list of strings. So these are a little recap of what you can do with strings. So here's another exercise. Read the exercise, see if you can complete it, pause it, and then check your answer. And you can see here that this statement takes the smallest string string in the list W, badminton, and concatenates it with the largest one, which is bat. That's alphabetically the maximum, and concatenates them together. Okay, let's look at this term called mutable. Mutable means changeable. Can we change something? So we talk in computer parlance of lists being mutable, but strings being immutable in Python. That means we can't change a string. For instance, we're going to create a string here, called cat, and while we can retrieve the middle character of cat, let's try and change it. Let's see if we could change that to an R so that we would get the string CRT instead of cat. And what will happen is we're going to get an error. If we wanted to change C to contain a string called CRT, we would have to start from scratch. So strings are immutable. They cannot be changed. Lists, however, are mutable. For instance, we have a list here of 3 elements. And if I wanted to change the middle element, notice I don't get an error. And if I print W, you'll now see that the middle element has been changed to 8. So lists can be changed. They're mutable. A string is immutable. Finally, we're going to look at what are called some list methods, and we looked at min and max before. So min of a list is a function min. It's called with what's called argument. So this is the argument, this is the function. Functions called in lists are called methods. So if this is a list, min is a method, and these are a list of methods that we can use on lists. So let's look at our list W. I can say W dot, we're going to append 10. And now if I look at W, you'll see 10 is appended. Before we look at count, let's add another number to our list. And so we've got 2 occurrences of W. You'll notice in the presentation we're actually wrong here. List.count does not return the number of items in the list. What it does is it returns the number of these items in the list. So we have a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 elements. But what we're going to do, the list.count, we take a list W, and what we're saying is how many 8s are in that list. So the count method here will find out how many of those elements are in our list, and here we have 2. Do we have any zeros? No. The index for 8 will return the first occurrence of 8. What's the index? Well, in positive numbers, this is the 0 index, this is the 1 index, 2, 3, and 4, so it should return a 1 here. If we wanted to remove an item from a list, that's called pop. The last item. So w.pop should take off the last item. It returns it here and it also takes it off of the list. And so on. One reverses order of the items and one sorts the list alphabetically. And you can play with those to see how they work. So this is your final little exercise. Attempt these, pause the video, and then check to see how well you did. So let's look at the answers here. The number of grades that are 7 is, we use the count function. We're looking for 7, and we find we've hit 2 grades. Change the last grade to a 4. Instead of just counting and saying 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, this is the 8th element, because this could be any size. Instead of doing G8 equals 4, which you could have, it's better and more efficient to use -1, because -1 is always going to be the last element. Find the max grade, just max of G, that's 10. Sort the grades, and this shows an error here which you can typically make. G.sort does not work, you'll get an error. You must put the brackets in here. So if we look back, we'll see here that when we use the sort feature, if there's no argument in here, you still need the round bracket. So for all these methods, you must have an item in here between the round brackets. If there's no argument in here, then you must put the brackets anyway with nothing inside. Find the average grade in this list, but assume that G could contain as many numbers. You don't know how many numbers, so don't just add these up and divide by the number. So you do that by saying, okay, I'll take the sum of G, and then I'm going to divide that by the length of G. And these functions, length and sum, are going to do the work for us. So this statement will work regardless of the length of G. So that is all you should need to know about lists and strings. So now you can work on that assignment to turn into your instructor.